Hi everyone. So in this video demonstration, I'm going to show you how to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism using Marie assembly language. So a rectangular prism is defined as a three-dimensional shape having six faces, where all the faces of the prism are rectangles, such that every two opposite side faces are identical. So to compute the volume of a rectangular prism, so we use this formula. So we have here volume is equal to length times width times height. So in here, we see this object shown on the right side having its length, width, and height. Before we proceed with doing this in Marie, let us first have a comparison with how this can be implemented in the C language. So in the C language, this can be performed with basic operations. So the formula for the rectangular prism is simply length times width times height. So all you need to do is to ask the user to enter the values of the length, width, and height, and then simply multiply those values. Now, the challenge with converting this code to Marie is that Marie does not support the multiplication operation. So it only have the addition and the subtraction operators. So we have to mimic the behavior of the multiplication by simply doing several addition. So let's proceed with our code. Alright, so before we discuss the code to calculate the volume of the rectangular prism, first let's take a look at the expected output of this particular code. So I'm going to open the simulator. Okay, I'm going to load the file and let's try to run the program. So it's going to ask the user to enter three values. Okay, one for the length. So I'm going to write here 4. Okay, one for the width. So I'm going to write here 6. And one for the height. So I'm going to write here 3. So it's in ASCII. So I'm going to change this to decimal. So it's 72. So that's 4 times 6. That's 24 times 3. That's 72. So the result here is correct. So let's try another value. So let's reload this program. Okay, so I'm going to write here, let's try smaller values. I'm going to write 2 for the length, 3 for the width, and 4 for the height. So that's 2 times 3 times 4. So 2 times 3, that's 6. 6 times 4, that's 24. So we see here that the output of the program is correct. Now let's try and dissect the code. All right, now let's start discussing the code. So we see here the code starts with setting the origin to 100, and then we ask the user to enter the first value. So the first value is num1, which will serve as the variable that will store the length. So this num1 here is declared and initialized here below. We have num1, num2, and num3 declared as decimal, having 0 as their default values. We also have here sum1. So this sum1 here will store the result of num1 times num2. So again, there is no multiplication operator here in Marie. So we will have to do the multiplication manually. So that is adding this num1 as many times depending on the value of num2. So sum2 here will store the value of the result of num1 times num2, and then we will multiply the result of that to num3. We will store the value into num2. We will use count here as our counter for the loop that we'll be using, with another variable 1, which is a constant that we will use to increment the value of count. All right. So here at the top, after setting the value to num1, after storing the value to num1, we will ask the user again to enter the value of num2 for the width, and in num3, that is for the height. So the next thing that we will do is we will set up the first operation, which is simply to add num1 as many times depending on the value of num2. So we will have to load num2 to the accumulator, and then we will store that value to our count. So count here will now, from 0, it will now become the value of num2. So let's have an example. Say for example, the value of num1 is 2. Let's have here 5, and let's have 4. So num2, the value of num2 is 5. The value of count is initially 0, but now it will become the value of 2, which is 5. So we have here our first loop. So here we will load the value of num1. So again, the value of num1 is 2. And then we will add the value of sum1. So sum1 is simply 0 at the beginning. So that's 2 plus 0. So that's 2 plus 0. I'm just going to write here 2 plus 0. And then we will store the result of that to sum1, okay, thereby updating the value of sum1 to 2. Alright, so next we will load the value of count, which is now set to 5. So AC here will now become 5, and we will subtract 1 from it. So that's 5 minus 1. So the purpose of this 5 minus 1 is because we want to perform this addition of 2 5 times. So we get 10. That's 2 times 5, 10. Or simply adding 2, okay, 5 times, which is also 10. So we've already added 2 here once. So we will remove 1 from this count. So next we will store this updated value of count, which is now 4. So if this skip condition here is true, or in other words, if count is greater than 0, this line will be true and the next line will be skipped. So in this case, 4 is greater than 0, so this one is true, this line is skipped, and then it will proceed with this jump loop 1. So jump loop 1 is simply this loop right here. So it will go back to the top where it will try to load num1 again, which is 2, and it will add the value of sum1, which is currently 2. So that's 2 plus 2, making the value of this sum1 4, and then it will load count again. So remember that the previous value of count is 4. So this one should be 4. So that's 4 minus 1, okay, making this new value of count as 3. So 3 is still greater than 0, so this line is skipped, and it will go back at the top. So this process will continue until this particular count value reaches the value 0. By the time it reaches 0, it should have added this 2 here 5 times. So once it has fulfilled this sort of design, this line here will be false since 0 is not greater than 0 or not lesser than 0. So this line here will be executed where it will proceed with the next operation. So again, we already got num1 times num2 that is stored on sum1. So what we want now to do is to multiply sum1 with num3, and then we will store the result of that to sum2. So in here we have this count condition where we loaded num3. So the value of num3 here is 4. So it's 4, and we will store that as the new value of our count. Then we have here our loop number 2, where we will load the value of sum1 to our AC, and then we will add the value of sum2. Again, the value of sum2 is by default 0. So that's sum1, so 10 plus 0. Again, sum1 here in this example is 10. Then it will store the value of sum2 as 10. Then the value of count will be loaded. So again, count here was set to the value of num3, which is 4. So here, it should be 4. And then we have here, we will subtract 1. So that's 4 minus 1. So the new value of count should be 3. Now, this is the same, basically the same with the one that we have above. So we will check if the value in the AC or accumulator is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, meaning this condition is true, it will skip the next line, but then, and instead it will proceed with the next line, which in this case is loop number 2. So it will do the same process, very similar process. So let's take a look. So for example, it will load sum1 again. So the value of sum1 is still 10, and then it will add the value of sum2 to sum1. So again, the value of sum2 is now not 0, but rather this is 10, because we've already added 10 in the previous iteration. So here it will store the value of sum2. So that's 10 plus 10, we get 20. So and then it will load the value of count. So the updated value of count is now 3. So this is 3 minus 1. So this one becomes 2. So this is still true because 2 is still greater than 0. So this will only be false once we reach the value 0. By the time it reaches 0, we should have added 4 tens. Alright? After that, so this condition will be false since 0 is not greater than 0. So this line here will be executed. So it will go to the end block, which is right here. In the end block, we will simply load the value of sum2, which contains this 10 times 4, or simply 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. That value will be displayed to our AC. And after that, the program will be stopped. So that's 2 times 5, that's 10, times 4, that's 40. And that's the result of sum 2. Alright, so that's how you calculate the volume of a rectangular prism in Marie. So thank you everyone for watching.